Tag, Buongiorno, Godag, Kalimera. I hope I didn't butcher that too much. My name is Vanessa Ibarra, and I'm the Director for the Mayor's Office of International Affairs for the City of Atlanta. And on behalf of the city, the European Consul Generals, and the Chambers of Commerce, it is a pleasure to welcome you all here today to their European Union webinar entitled Doing Business in the Southeast, and also a farewell to two distinguished guests and also close friends. I've been asked to address a few housekeeping items. Due to the large number of attendees, we do please ask everyone to disable their video and mute their microphone. This will enable us to be able to highlight our speakers here today and be able to hear the conversation clearly. Before this event, the European Chambers of Commerce collected a series of questions that were submitted by their respective members. I'll be using these questions today to ask our panelists to provide some answers. If you have additional questions that you would like to submit, you can do this via the chat option, which is at the bottom of your window. If for whatever reason I'm unable to get through all these questions due to time constraints or the number of questions, we will collect them and provide you an answer at the end of the event. I would like to take this opportunity to really thank everyone for joining us here today. I know we're all being pulled in multiple directions. Our personal and professional lives are now under the same roof. We're adapting to life during this global pandemic, and COVID-19 has really impacted our societies in more ways than we could have imagined a year ago, even a few months ago, around health, economy, diplomacy, education, sports, or everyday social interaction, just to name a few, and has also brought to light now more than ever income inequality and systemic racism. 2020 will certainly go down as a year of change, reflection, challenges, but also a year where we notice now more than ever the importance of collaborating to find solutions to the many challenges that we're facing, not only in Atlanta, in the state, in the United States, but around the world. The City of Atlanta is a proud partner of the European Chambers, the consulates, the trade offices. We work very closely with them, as well as the various nonprofit organizations that are based here. And we do this in many different ways, through economic diplomacy, culture, education, attracting events, in many different ways. You name it, we've done it. LGBTQIA affairs, equity, diversity, and inclusion, sustainability. I can go on and on. And it is clear that the relationship is not only strong with the City of Atlanta, but it is also strong with the Southeast. Our two guests today cover Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee. And now I can't speak for all of the Southeast, but based on the research that I did, Europe does pack quite a punch and is usually around the top 5 when it comes to the number of facilities and employment in the Southeast. In Georgia alone, just to give you some context, out of the top 10 countries with facilities in Georgia, 4 are from the European Union, 5 are from Europe, and based on the top 10 countries by employment, 5 are from the European Union. There's also a lot of diplomatic exchanges that have been taking place. We did have the visit from Prime Minister Mark Rutte, who came along with Minister President Bourgeois. We had the Taoiseach, the former Taoiseach, and the Kenny, and we've also had in the past mayors and governors go visit various European countries. With that said, none of this would be possible without the leadership of our consul generals. They are instrumental in building this relationship between their respective countries and the Southeast. So we thank them for everything that they do for us. I'll be your host, I'll be your moderator, and today, most importantly, I'll be your timekeeper. And with that said, I would like to ask our two guests to please unmute themselves and enable their videos, so I may briefly introduce them. William? There you are.
Here I am.
So for today, unfortunately for us, the two distinguished guests will be leaving the City of Atlanta. Consul General Baets will be leaving at the end of July after 4 years and 4 months. This is what he wrote, 4 years and 4 months. So he's been keeping track. And Consul General Stevens will be departing after 5 years with us. I'd like to thank you both for taking the time to share your insights and what you've learned about doing business in the Southeast. So I will start by introducing very quickly Consul General Shane Stevens, Consul General of Ireland in the Southeast. He is also the Dean of the Consular Corps. And for those that may not be familiar what the Dean of the Consular Corps means, it is the most senior career diplomat, and is also based on the amount of time that they spend on a specific post, in this case, in the city of Atlanta. Consul General Shane Stevens took over as the second Consul General of Ireland in Atlanta in July 2015. Since joining Ireland's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in 2001, Consul General Stevens has served at Ireland's embassies to Tanzania, the Holy See, the European Union, Nigeria, and Malaysia. So with that, I do believe you have a one slide that you would like to share with us, Consul General.
Just a quick slide for a second. This is where you can find us. We're very proud to work with an honorary consul in Charlotte, one in Miami and one in Orlando, and we hope to expand that further. We've also committed recently, as part of our Global Ireland program, to set up a Consulate General of Ireland in Miami, a city I think you know well, Vanessa. And so, of course, we work closely with the Irish Chamber here in Atlanta. And I know that Siobhan Tinsley, the president of that chamber, is on the call. But we also work closely with the South Florida Irish American Chamber of Commerce down in Miami as well. So that's a little bit about our team.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Consul General. The next person I'll be introducing is the Consul General of Belgium, William de Baets. Consul General de Baets is an EU diplomat, started as a Navy officer and joined the diplomatic service in 2000. First posting was Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, followed postings as deputy head of mission in Caracas, Venezuela, which I hold a dear place there since I am from Venezuela, and Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. He went back to the headquarters in Brussels, where he headed the Foreign Affairs Crisis Center. Thereafter, he came to the US, first as a political diplomat in the embassy in Washington, DC, and then he came to, as he liked to say, the real USA as a Consul General in Atlanta. And Consul General, I do believe you have some slides that you would like to share with the audience here today.
Yeah, well, if you allow me, thank you very much, Vanessa. This is probably the right moment to explain a little bit why we are here, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much to you, of course, for moderating and keeping the time, and to the European Chambers for organizing this webinar. First of all, let me say that it has been an honor to serve Belgium here in the southeast of the US, and it has been a pleasure at the same time. I and my family, we had an excellent time in Atlanta. It will be one of the postings that we will keep as a very good memory. Now, why is there a Consulate General in Atlanta? That's always the question that we face, of course. Why are you in Atlanta? But let me first say that the relations between Belgium and the US are old and strong. They started even before Belgium existed. They started even before the US existed as a country. As you know, with the history of Europe, it has always been quite complicated and complex. We were ruled by the Spaniards, by Austrians, by Dutch, and so on. And the people participated in expeditions with the Spaniards and the Dutch as well. So you will find people from my country, if you want, who came to the Americas quite early. But fast forward, in 1830, Belgium decided to become independent, which means that Belgium is a younger country than the USA. But very fast, of course, Belgium, in order to survive, they needed to trade. They needed to look for markets overseas. And the USA was quite an obvious market as well. So very fast, Belgium established official relations in the Southeast. Also in Georgia. Already in 1834, we opened consulates in Savannah, Big Harbor, in Charleston, and New Orleans. It was very important for our trade. Now, if you go a little bit further in history, then in 1860 already, we opened also an honorary consulate in Atlanta. And that honorary consulate became a consulate general in 1970. I'm still trying to find the exact date, but it is exactly 50 years ago. 50 years ago, we upgraded our honorary consulate to a consulate general because of the importance of the Southeast for Belgium, for the business relations mainly, but also, of course, for the friendship relations and the alliance that we have with the US. In 1978, the Belgian national carrier Sabena was the first foreign carrier to operate from Atlanta Airport. So we always say is that if Atlanta is now the biggest and the busiest airport in the world, we opened the gate. But that, of course, attracted a lot of business people as well, because that direct line between Brussels and Atlanta is so important for the business relations in Georgia in the first place, but then later on in the whole of the Southeast as well, just as are the ports, Savannah and Charleston that I mentioned before. Now, and that's the reason why we have a consulate general here, because Atlanta is really the business capital of the Southeast. As you will see on these two slides, the first slide gives in fact the trade relations between Belgium and the US. And you will see that it is quite an important relationship between the US and Belgium. As a matter of fact, Belgium is a tiny country. It's only the size of Maryland. It has a little bit bigger population than Georgia, but it is the 24th supplier of the US. Imagine the size of Belgium. It's only the size of Maryland, population a bit bigger than the population in Georgia, GDP a bit higher than the one of Georgia, but it is the 24th supplier of the entire USA. What is even better to know, it is the 11th export destination for the US as a whole. And on this slide, you can see the proportion that the Southeast takes in this bilateral trade. And it is a little bit punching above its weight, especially if you know that you have California and Texas, which are powerhouses. If you take the whole of the Southeast, it really takes a very important place in the trade relations. If we go to the next slide, you will see the Belgian presence, all the businesses in the Southeast. You can see that's quite a concentration, right? That is very important. And as a matter of fact, Georgia is the #1 state in the US, in the whole of the US, in number of Belgian subsidiaries. The reasons for that are quite obvious. You have that connection, Atlanta Airport, very important. The presence of the harbors, very important. The east of the Southeast, of the east and the Southeast in particular of the USA are of course a big market. And there is that only 6 hours time difference with Belgium. So that makes it an ideal place to operate. And of course, we have an excellent consulate general here as well, promoting all these business relations. So now I'm doing my job, but I'm not by myself. I have a team of people working at the Consulate General, where we have a double mission. We have on the one hand, the consular affairs, and you know what it is. We are a kind of a city administration for the Belgian community in the Southeast. And I have to say that I cover 10 states. So you have to add to the 7 that you mentioned, you have to add Florida, Louisiana, and Arkansas. Quite important, in fact, especially in Florida, we have a big Belgian community and also quite, as you can see on the slide, a good presence of businesses. So we have our consular mission, where we are city administration for the 5,500 registered Belgians in the Southeast. And of course, we also give visa and other services to non-Belgians. And our second mission is public economic diplomacy, selling Belgium as a good country where to do business and to do business with. Now for that, Belgium is a federal country. Not all competences are at the level of the Belgian federal government. A number of competences are with the regions, Flanders, Wallonia, and Brussels. It's a little bit like in the US. The US is also a federal country, another size, of course, but the principle is the same. There is a lot of competences, a lot of autonomy given to the states in the US, and for Belgium, given to the regions. So if we go to the next slide, you will see the offices that we have, well, you will see the contact details of the other offices in the Southeast. So on top, you see the Consulate General, and then you see that we have a Flanders Investment and Trade Office located in Atlanta. And there is one for the Walloon region as well, but that is located in Houston. And then we also have, of course, the Belgian American Chamber of the South, co-organizer of this event. So here you have the main contacts. Whatever you need from Belgium, you can reach out to us, and we will be very glad to assist and to help you. So I think that will stop my first introduction and the answer to why are we here in Atlanta. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, William. And Shane, if I can ask you the same question, I know you talked a little bit about how you are structured, but if you can talk a little bit more about the Irish presence in the Southeast, I think that'd be very interesting for everybody to know.
Thank you for the opportunity, Vanessa. I appreciate it. So it's really wonderful. I guess at the start, I want to say to have this EU theme send-off with you, Vanessa, and also with William from Belgium. You know, Ireland and Belgium are so similar. We're both countries that are absolutely at the heart of the European Union, and countries with a deep commitment to multilateralism. And yesterday, we got another new connection was established between our countries. Belgium has recently been serving the world on the UN Security Council, and Ireland yesterday was voted in for a place on the UN Security Council ourselves. So we're very excited about that. I'm wearing the badge to mark the occasion. I just want to tell everybody out there, both the Americans and others, that we're going to bring to this role our own kind of unique understanding of the challenges of peace building and peacekeeping, what we have known about the debilitating impacts of hunger and migration, forced migration, and the transformative powers of education. That's a little bit about what Ireland is thinking about these days. Now, to this posting and what I've learned over the last 5 years, well, I'm particularly proud to have played a big role, along with many of the other people on this call, in having built up the EU presence here as a cohesive joint effort. I think we've really made a lot of progress over the last 5 years, both in terms of the way the EU consul generals work together, how we work with the honorary consuls, and how EU firms, chambers, and communities have started to cooperate more and more. And you know, in this era, when diplomats in the last 5 years, you know, diplomats have started working a lot more on public diplomacy, communicating messages internationally, and we've been doing that so much together. And I think that's been very, very important, particularly given how important the European Union is to the United States, and how little is really known about that, but perhaps particularly in this region. So I think it's been a really important thing. Again, I had a chance to play a role as the chair of the EU group here in 2016 and 2019. I had a chance to organize a big EU Day event last year with many of the people on this call. And in fact, I was particularly proud to bring over a very pro-EU, but world-class Irish drag queen, an LGBTQI activist, Panty Bliss, also for the Atlanta Pride celebrations last year, which were so absolutely wonderful. And I just want to, you know, so I just want to emphasize the point that while business is very important to us, values are very much part of what we do, and culture as well. And again, I think the key thing about this EU-US relationship is that, just to put it really simply, the EU is the most important for states areas, just to keep it really simple. You know, in terms of building a rules-based system for international trade and most other things, in terms of advancing international human rights and diplomacy, in terms of scientific research, in terms of international development, and most obviously for investment, we are the most important partners for the US. I think it's so important that we get that message out again and again. And again, it's quite easy to get this message out in Georgia and in the Southeast because of how evident the impact of our investment is here. Altogether, European Union trade and investment is worth 190,000 jobs in Georgia. Again, that EU trade and investment is worth about the same for North Carolina. EU trade and investment is worth 145,000 jobs in South Carolina, a much smaller state. It's worth 120,000 jobs in Tennessee. I know there are many people from Tennessee on this call today, so that just want to bring that to their attention. And our investment in trade is worth 230,000 jobs in Florida. And again, I'm referencing the states that are, I know I've seen the list of who's attending, so I just wanted to particularly highlight those states. But I'm also glad I was also very glad to see that the city of Cork represented in this call. So just a big shout out and welcome to them. Again, as a small country, Ireland is very proud of the fact that we employ over 6,000 people in Georgia in our companies. And we employ even more people in Florida. And this is coming from a relatively low level. The increase in our engagement in the economies of the Southeast has been dramatic in recent years. And I can give a few really simple examples of that. CRH Americas is an Irish company based here in Atlanta. It employs 40,000 people across North America. Another Irish company, the Kerry Group, now has facilities in Rome, Savannah, and Calhoun. And again, I would estimate it now employs about 1,000 people in Georgia. And that's even before the latest investment of 125 million that the Kerry Group put into its own operation back in March. And again, I think you asked Vanessa for a little bit of a comment about solidarity and what the significance is of EU solidarity. Well, I think at the last one of these seminars, we learned all about what the EU is doing in terms of solidarity at home and in terms of its investment in international development. And we're very proud of that. I'm also proud of how the EU Consul Generals have come together more intensely since the pandemic to support each other here in Atlanta. We're having conference calls every single week. But it's really not hard to sell an Irishman on EU solidarity. Ireland has probably benefited more than any other country in the European Union from that solidarity. It was since Ireland joined the European Union in the 1970s that we saw our transformation from one of the very poorest parts of the European Union to one of the most dynamic and progressive parts of our wonderful bloc. That transformation was facilitated enormously by great EU investment in our infrastructure, and was facilitated by the fact that as EU members of the EU bloc, we've been able to get the best possible deals for trade for our companies, and our companies have been able to operate a huge market of more than 500 million of the wealthiest consumers in the world. And again, just in recent months, EU solidarity has been absolutely on our minds. It's because of the way in which the European Union has approached the Brexit negotiations, and also because of the support we've had from friends in the US, that we're now certain that Brexit will not lead to any major undermining of our Good Friday Agreement peace agreement. It's because of this support that we are sure there will be no hard border on the island of Ireland. And if there were any uncertainties in my mind about those issues, I was glad to hear Robert Emmett Lighthizer, the US trade representative, speaking in the US Congress in the last few days, making it clear that there can be no possibility of any negotiation, so to speak, about the continued and full implementation of the Good Friday Agreement in Ireland. So you've asked for 3 recommendations. I'll give those very quick, because I know I've gone long on my time.
That's all right.
We want more collaboration within Team EU, like events like this. I'd like to see us continue to get the word out more dynamically about what the European Union collectively offers the United States. And I would think that we should, all of us on this call, be proud ambassadors for the European Union and what we do in this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shane. There's a lot to unpack there, but I think it is truly important, and to your point, really to emphasize the importance of trade between the United States and Europe. And what we've seen here on a local level is that you all very much work together to continue to bring that awareness to all the different companies that are interested in going global. We do have a lot of companies, and they're always looking at the European market. They've looked precisely at Ireland, they're looking at Belgium, Germany, due to the ease of doing business, but also because of all the services that are provided. And it is a two-way street. We do see a lot of folks that are coming here. We had Enterprise Ireland that has come here as well. We've had conversations with them. From Belgium, the Wallonia folks that came here to have discussions. And I think this leads me to the next question to both of you. Is we talked a lot about business, but it would be interesting given the fact that the Southeast is so large. What industries, what types of businesses do you see succeeding the most here in the Southeast? And also, because you mentioned, of course, we've been talking about COVID-19 and the global pandemic, are there specific businesses and services that have actually had exponential growth despite the many challenges that are here. And William, I'll turn that question to you. Kick it off, and then we'll go back to you, Shane.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa. That is indeed a very good question. But I think that the answer is not that easy. The Southeast is not homogeneous either. I would say that the Belgian businesses who come to the Southeast, generally speaking, are mature businesses. So they know what they are doing, they are already successful, and if they come here, they have thought it well through. The impression that I had over the last 4 years is that, in fact, all the businesses are quite successful, and there are some key elements for that. And I would say one of the main reasons is the people that you can find here. Well-trained people, well-skilled people, and people with the willingness of working. Of course, you have the proximity of the market, you have the connections, as I said before, a very good business climate. And of course, you have a cluster of specialties as well. For example, in Louisiana, we will find a lot of chemical companies, chemical industry. And of course, some logistics. In Georgia, it's more diversified because it's a strong economy as well. And if you see how it evolved over time, we came in here basically with the flooring. And you might know that the Dalton area at a certain point was called the Belgian Valley. Mm. But now the last investments are in bioscience and high tech. So I think there is room for many successes here. And I really I can't say that there is a sector that is doing better than another. I think that most sectors have their attractiveness. In North Carolina, which is also part of my jurisdiction, you have the presence of the research triangle, which is really very important, especially in biosciences. We see that there is a strong connection growing between Belgium and the research triangle. And as a matter of fact, some days ago, there was an announcement Belgium, again, my hometown, based company, Biotalis, that will establish its American headquarters in the research triangle. A little bit before, there was another announcement, and then we come in fact to the second part of your question. During the pandemic, so we had Biotalis, we had another announcement by a company specialized in making fabrics for used in the health sector, diapers and that kind of things. Ontex, they're also going to North Carolina, announced during the pandemic. The big pharmaceutical company, UCB, which is here, they announced also an expansion, more than $40 million here in Atlanta, also announced during the pandemic. We had recently an expansion of Barco's, high-tech and screen and projections and so on. They announced, they did an expansion in Atlanta. And I could go on. In the logistics, there is OMP, also Atlanta-based. They are also expanding very fast. And of course, the pandemics have caused some slowdown of the trade. Although in some sectors, it's gone up. For example, when it comes to chemicals used for the medical sector, for the pharmaceutical sector, it really went up. And in other areas as well. In other areas, we know that some people have need of enjoying the confinement, of moving around. So, for example, we know that motorbikes, they sell better than before the pandemics. So the pandemics have very strange impact, I would say, on the trade and the industries. But generally speaking, the business climate here is very good for all kind of businesses. And you know it, Charlotte is a banking center, but Atlanta is the fintech center. So you have a perfect couple over there to attract companies, startups in financial technology, and then they hope to grow and to go worldwide. Really, I think that you really have a very good business climate in all sectors. Yeah, and I assume Shane will probably join me in that analysis. But what I see also on the European side, many European companies come from a wide range of activities. And there is a whole variety of activities coming from all over the EU. So I don't think it's specific for Belgium.
Thank you, William. And Shane, I'll give you the opportunity also to answer that question.
Thank you very much. Yes, we've seen strong, as William said, strong, steady growth in terms of Irish investment in this region over the last 5 years, definitely. So our traditional sectors that I mentioned already, construction and food, have grown very, very strongly. We've also seen, I would probably say, almost a doubling in terms of our footprint in advanced manufacturing, with particular strongholds in South Carolina and Florida on the advanced manufacturing side. Probably the area where we've seen fastest growth has been in high-tech investments. So that's particularly fintech investments into Atlanta and Nashville, health tech investments into Nashville, and then high-tech investments related to the automotive sector in Greenville. So some of those companies that have been involved in these investments have been Sysnet, Fineos, Global Shares, Warwick Tech, Rockall Tech in Charlotte, Tire Check, Cordlytics, WorldNet, Umba. They're some of the companies that have come in recently and grown most fastly. And I think those companies are very much rooted and based in the digital economy. And I think we'll see with the rollout of this pandemic, broadly speaking, that those companies who are strong in the digital, strong from a digital point of view, companies that have on the internet type operations, those companies will suffer less from the impacts of the pandemic. And I know several of those fintech companies that I've mentioned, especially some of those who are involved in cybersecurity, think their medium and long-term prospects are good. So those are some of the sectors that we've seen growing most strongly. And I think the fact that I'm very proud of the fact that the growth is being fast. I mean, we probably came from a lower point than Belgium traditionally. We weren't always a wealthy country, but our growth has been very strong in recent years. The trajectory is good. And I think the fact that we have a strong investment and strong ability on the digital side and high-tech side bodes well for the future.
Thank you, Shane. And so William and Shane, you both mentioned how, of course, the Southeast is not one market, if you will. There's different industries: agriculture, life sciences, and of course, you mentioned technology. In Atlanta specifically, of course, fintech, health IT, cybersecurity, just to name a few. I think what would also be interesting is, and William, you mentioned that as well, of course, the ports, the airport, the global connectivity, the workforce that you have here. But I think at least for the Southeast, what else can we do to promote the region more effectively to companies from Belgium, from Ireland? And are these companies aware of the successes that they can have if they come to the Southeast? And I'll start with you, William, again.
Yeah, well, that's a very good question, because in fact, you have the same kind of challenge as we have in Belgium. We are not Germany, we are not the UK, we are not France. These are the names that pop up when you talk about Western Europe. When you talk about the US and Belgium, people think about New York, California, Texas, and at the best, the Southeast will come in the fourth place. So we have exactly the same kind of challenges. And we ask ourselves all the time, how can we profile ourselves? How can we build that image? Now, it's not that easy, of course, but I think you have to talk to people. At the end, business is like diplomacy. You first need to meet people, to know people, and to build a trust relationship. So I would say, what can you do? You can probably have an alliance in the Southeast and go together to our countries and promote yourself and try really to connect with the people you would like to connect with. You identify the sectors that you're interested in, even the companies, the individual companies you are interested in, and then go and see them. Mm-hmm. And we can help you with that. The Consulate General and our regional the trade and investment commissioners can help you with that. We can tailor programs for people visiting our countries. You can do that at the European level as well, of course, because the lot is decided on the European level. And also in Europe, there are more and more programs to try to harmonize, I would say, a little bit our businesses. So that's really a recommendation I would give you. Then what we also do, and that you would probably be able to do as well, is to highlight the quality of life. We do that because in Belgium, we have really a high quality of life. Of course, everybody knows beer, waffle, chocolates, and so on. But there is more than that. There is an excellent health system. There is an excellent educational system, excellent social security, and so on. So there is more than just the business aspect. There is also the human aspect, and that's very important. That's why I say, go to Belgium, go to Europe, and connect with people.
Absolutely. And I really like what you said, William, about really connecting people to people, the people-to-people diplomacy, because I think a lot of times is, yes, and I'm just speaking from my own experiences and from seeing, there's a lot of presentations, right? And usually what it feels like is just the top is being changed. So the different city, different state. But I think it's really important to really emphasize that quality of life and really that DNA, I would say, of that city, of that state. So definitely hear you. I think it's extremely important to do that. And Shane, do you have any advice for us in the Southeast on how to promote our region, how to promote our respective states and cities?
Well, I think you're already doing very well in general. I think there's a lot of energy and a lot of focus in terms of the work of the economic development professionals in this region. I mean, we found that trade missions have worked very well. It's been the impact that Governor Deal had visiting Ireland. When Kasim Reed visited Ireland, it had a big impact. Again, Governor Haslam, we were very delighted to have him in Ireland. The Florida Chamber did a major visit to us, which was very valuable. The Upstate Alliance from South Carolina have engaged in a very strategic and programmatic way with Ireland, encouraging trade missions into Ireland and also bringing people from Ireland back into South Carolina. And I think, again, the Research Triangle Regional Partnership from North Carolina have done great work. And again, colleagues from Mississippi and Alabama, again, have had great trade missions to Ireland. So all those trade missions have been very valuable. And I think, as William said, the more you get to know the companies, when you get to know your own companies and also foreign companies, and when you understand what they need, you really come to be in a position where you can help advance really useful business relationships. And I think the kind of more modern, I love the approach that Atlanta has and many of our partners where they're open to fostering economic relationships that go in both directions. There's a confidence, there's an understanding that it's a two-way street. Irish companies coming in here can benefit Atlanta, but also when Atlanta companies go to Ireland and grow faster there than they can anywhere else, that's also a big win for Atlanta. So I think those kind of confident understandings are great. And I agree, when you have these trade missions and you get to know people, you learn not just about how the businesses work and what they need, but also you learn about the culture and the values, and you can see where there's a good match. And I think, for example, with Atlanta, we always find a great match there. And but again, we found Irish people get on very well in the southeast of the United States. We have a sense of cultural affinity with people here in terms of our heritage and our diaspora and our English language, of course, it helps. And so I think we find Irish people get Americans and Americans get Irish people. And that has been a great basis for the relationships.
Thank you, Shane. I do have a question for both of you that was not part of the list that I shared with you all, but I'm curious to know your answer. So with COVID-19, with the global pandemic, you both mentioned the importance of trade missions. Now with everything that is being impacted, how are your respective countries approaching trade missions? Because we're very much looking at it also from the city standpoint. We both always work very closely with the state, the Metro Atlanta Chamber, Invest Atlanta, to see where it is that we're going, and of course looking at the key industries and where companies want to go. But as we see here also, prime example today, everything has gone virtual. What are your countries doing to promote trade missions and to continue to promote your respective countries in this virtual world that we're now living in?
Well, we've already had one fairly substantive virtual trade mission run by our Minister for Finance, Pascal Donohoe, to Washington just about 2 weeks ago. And that's been one good area of initiative. And again, we had a trade-based mission to Atlanta and this South Carolina and other parts of Georgia as recently as the 12th of March. So we haven't really been taking our eye off the ball yet, I wouldn't say. And again, we will all seek opportunities to do what we can to get back to normal as much as possible as things develop. But of course, it'll depend on what's safe to do.
William, do you have anything to add, or should I go on to the next question?
Well, I can just add that we have a limited number of very big economic missions. Twice a year, the king has a state visit, and the result was an economic part of that. These visits have been cancelled. And twice a year, we have a big economic mission, which is led by Princess Astrid, and these have been cancelled as well. We have some bilateral, I would say, meetings and travels, but the big ones we don't have anymore. But what we do, the regions do that. They have virtual trade missions, if you want, and they continue working with the people they already know. So that's why it is so important to have people on the field, to have consulates, but also regional trade offices, because they know people. And once we establish that relationship, that confidence and that trust relationship, you can more easily continue also in a virtual way. It will be, for example, way more difficult for my successor to come here, because at the beginning, he won't be able to meet people in person. And when you haven't met people before, it's a little bit more complicated to have that virtual conversation.
Thank you. Another question, and just because y'all covered a lot of the things that I was going to ask earlier, I wanted to also ask you about sister cities. So we do have a sister city with Brussels. And I know Ireland, you just established not long ago a sister city with Miami, I believe. So I'm also curious to know, as we continue to further and create more ties between our different cities, have you seen the sister city model provide additional benefits and really bring more connections with your respective countries? And Shane, I'll ask you first.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have seen these relationships be very valuable. Again, I'm very glad to have a representative of Cork City, or the Chamber of Commerce from Cork City on the call, and we helped bring them to the city of Miami to develop a new partnership just a few months ago, which complements an established relationship that we have with Miami-Dade County, which was kicked off by Mayor Jimenez about 2 years ago when he visited County Cork. And and again, in recent times, we've seen the relationship between Savannah and Wexford grow in an exponential way. That relationship was it hasn't started as a sister city relationship. It started as an educational partnership that explored the heritage connection between these two areas. But it's developed. We've seen numerous trade missions grow on top of that heritage base. And just last November, Georgia Southern University established its first, I think, international campus in Wexford, Ireland, which a very important event, which was supported by our president and the president of Georgia Southern University. So it was a great occasion, which we're very proud of. I think very often those educational relationships are key to developing the wider relationship, both in terms of business, but also people-to-people contacts, research, and so on.
Thank you, Shane.
Yeah, well, to answer your question very frankly, sister city relations can be very different. Mm-hmm. Some remain a dead letter, an agreement that has been signed and nobody cares about it. And some of these relationships are really very lively. For the relationship between Atlanta and Brussels, that was signed more than 50 years ago. when Belgium was still a unitarian country. Meanwhile, Belgium became a federal country, and we created on top of the city of Brussels, the Brussels region, next to Flanders and Wallonia. And probably the time would be ripe perhaps to revisit a little bit that agreement and to see whether we shouldn't expand that relationship between Atlanta and Brussels to the region of Brussels and not only the city of Brussels. There is another example of a relationship that is the sister city relationship between Greenville, South Carolina, and Kortrijk in Belgium. And that's a wonderful relationship. It's not only an agreement on paper, but there is really things going on. Now, there is a lot of common history as well, common sizes, common kind of industry. For example, there are both textile industry places. And there was an exchange between mayors, but luckily there is also a backbone of other exchanges because, you know, that politicians come and go. So if you have an agreement that gets the interest of a politician, of a mayor, well, the next one might decide not being interested at all. So that backbone, and as Shane said, quite often it's in the education, exchange programs between universities, for example, are very helpful. But also between some sectors. For example, in Greenville and Kortrijk, it's the old textile industry and now more the technology, the high-tech industry. Now, there are other examples as well. Louisiana and the French-speaking part of Belgium. Because, you know, in Belgium, we are blessed having 3 national languages. Sometimes it leads to some complexity, but in fact, it's a richness. It's a wealth. We have Dutch or Flemish, the same language, French, and also a bit of German. So we really have that openness to different cultures. Well, Louisiana has that link with the French-speaking part of Belgium as well. And that's also a very a living relationship. There are exchanges, French teachers going to Louisiana from Belgium, exchanges between the parliament and the assembly of Louisiana, and that kind of thing. So it is very difficult to find a one-size-fits-all kind of sister city relationship. So what I have seen is very important is to have a backbone, not only that agreement, but a backbone, some activities and exchanges that are done between academics or between business people, and politicians, of course, can join them in that as well.
Absolutely, and I can echo that as well. Atlanta has about 17 sister cities, and we do have 5 that are more aligned with the different activities that we do in the sense of entrepreneurship, for example, education, as you mentioned, cultural exchanges, and it does differ from sister city to sister city because, as you mentioned, William, there may be a change in leadership, for example, in the city of Atlanta, but then there's also a change of leadership in that sister city. And so it's interesting to see, again, the people-to-people diplomacy piece, but also how it changes from administration to administration. So I'm looking at the clock. It is 12:49 p.m. I want to make sure that we end on time. I do have a question that the response may be a little bit lengthier. So if we can keep it a little bit brief, but I still want to ask this question because I think it's very important right now. The question is, as with many geopolitical issues, racism has always been strongly associated with America among international observers, in particular, the South. In particular, the South has suffered from a painful history. Recent events highlight the fact that the issue is not a Southern issue, but relevant across the country. Importantly, it's also not just an American issue, but prejudice and racism are present across the globe. What message do you take back to your respective governments and countries following your experience as spectators during your tenure here in the Southeast? And I'll start with you, Shane, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Vanessa. Yes, it's a serious point. You know, at home in Ireland, Irish people and our political leaders have been deeply saddened and shocked by many of the recent killings we've seen of Black citizens in the United States. And you know, our foreign minister and our Taoiseach have come out with statements. You know, in relation to the killing of George Floyd. Books of condolence were opened in many Irish cities for George Floyd. Again, even the recent shooting death on Friday in Atlanta has been all over the newspapers and in the press in Ireland, and we're deeply saddened. by these developments, and we're deeply concerned about the underlying issues of racial equality, racial inequality that are having an effect here, but also have an effect in many places around the world and in our own countries, including in Ireland. And in Ireland, recent developments in the US have sparked a new intensified debate about racial inequality and racism in Ireland. And that's something that is happening actively at the moment, both as encouraged and directed by our Prime Minister, and who himself has an Irish mother and an Indian father, but also it's happening spontaneously in civil society, in schools, all around the place. And so it's something that I think it demonstrates that striking solidarity and closeness that exists between the United States and Ireland in good times and in times of challenge. And so that's just some thoughts on the issue from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane.
Yeah, it gives us a lot to think about, all what we see today. And unfortunately, you can't undo history. That is impossible. But what we all can do, and Belgium wants to be a bridge builder in that as well on the global level, what we all can do is to aim at a better world, a world with more justice. It's not only about justice, it's also, and that comes all together, it's about tolerance and respect, respect for everyone. Now it's a bit ironic, but what happens here, in fact, comes just 2 months after an effort by our government in Belgium to face what we still have in Belgium as well. In Belgium, there is still racism. We struggle, of course, with the colonization and the suffering and injustice that people have known during the colonization. But even today, there is still injustice. There is still this discrimination in Belgium as well, because of your background. You find that in housing and in employment, for example. And in February, we had an interministerial conference exactly with that purpose. The government wanted to draw a national action plan against racism and against discrimination. So 2 months later, we see here in the USA the same kind of claims, but perhaps on another level, and of course with a more complicated history. And yesterday, as a matter of fact, in the UN, there was also, in the Human Rights Council, there was also a debate inspired by the racially inspired violations, human rights violations, and systemic racism and police brutality and so on. So Belgium also made a declaration in that, and basically we are all in the same. We have the same challenges all together, and we should show some solidarity and exchange experiences. What I have seen in being here in Atlanta, and I was posted in Washington, D.C. before, is, and I might be wrong, I haven't been long enough here, but it is a problem you can talk about here. And I think that the history of Atlanta as a civil rights basis it has been quite helpful, at least being able to talk about the problem, which doesn't mean, of course, that Atlanta doesn't face challenges. We face challenges as the rest of the country and the rest of the world. But I think we should all aim at a better world, more justice and more tolerance and more respect for each other. I think we all can contribute as officials, as government, but also as individuals.
Absolutely, and I think it's really important, the fact that we're all standing together in solidarity. I think it really shows a lot. My last question for you both, and my sister coined this term, how diplomats sometimes are perceived as diplomatic robots, which we know very well, you both are not, nor are any of those from the members of the Consular Corps. I want to ask you both, you're leaving, truly it's going to be a huge loss. but we also want to know from what we like to call the human factor, what was your experience? You both have children, you have your spouses here. What was your experience like outside of being a diplomat while living here in the Southeast?
We'll go first. So, will I go first, Vanessa, or just to kick it off? It's been really almost every day. It's been overwhelming for us because there's such a warmth of love for Ireland in the United States, and I found that. Well, I've certainly found that here in the Southeast, and again, we feel a particular kind of affinity, I think, in Ireland with people in the Southeast, because we have that, we share a kind of a rural background in a way. You know, we haven't always been rich in Ireland. The Southeast hasn't always been rich. And then, you know, we share so much in terms of, again, huge immigration is coming in both to the Southeast and to Ireland, enriching our zones so much. Our kids have loved being in Atlanta public schools. We have four kids, and they've just found it such a wonderful experience that they've absolutely loved it. And the food, I guess, has been even better and even more healthy than we could have imagined. There's been, it's just been great. And again, you know, for me, for my family, and for all, we've been so amazed at the striking beauty of the region. You know, just traveling around, going down to Oakland Cemetery, going to Charleston, you know, going to Miami, of course, where it's so different again from anywhere else in the Southeast. It's just been such an amazing cultural experience. The diversity is incredible. The food, the welcome is always there. There's always that warm welcome. There's a slightly more easygoing way like we have in Ireland, and we've all just loved it.
Thank you, Shane. William?
Well, I fully agree with Shane, and I'm so grateful that I got Atlanta as a posting. My family and I, we had an excellent time here. But you said something about diplomacy and private life. You know, there is not always a clear line between both of us. Because we wake up early in the morning, we are reading already about what happens here, and then we go late, we go out first official events, official functions, but very fast they all become friends. And so there is no clear line between all that. When I traveled in the Southeast and I discovered all these beautiful places, all new people, I often said myself, well, I should share this with my wife and with my family as well. So let's go back afterwards. And that's what we did. Quite often I discovered something on a professional basis, and later on I went with the whole family because I wanted them to discover that as well. Now, I don't think we have that much time, but I will say what we will miss when we go back. But perhaps what we are also looking forward. First of all, let's start with that. I'm looking forward that my kids can go walking or biking to the school. I'm looking forward that I can do my groceries walking as well, that I don't need always that car, and that I spend, and that I will have a better idea of how much time I will spend from home to the office, because now it can be 15 minutes, it can be 45 minutes, depending on the rain. But no, honestly, what we will miss is that the warmth, the hospitality. The Southern hospitality is not something that you invented here. It's something that is present. The spontaneous talks with people, that's something we won't have anymore in Belgium. We have to adapt to that. And my kids will be quite surprised that they arrive in Belgium and people won't start a conversation with them just like that. And it's great. The food, of course, is great as well, the diversity. There is more diversity than we expected. When you're in Europe, we all love the US, but we see the US as one homogeneous block. But it is not. If you go to Louisiana, where you have the crawfish, it's not the same as the barbecue. And even in Tennessee, they fight between the East and the West to know who has the best barbecue. So the diversity is fantastic as well. Unknown, it was discovery, but fantastic. And I'm very grateful having had this opportunity to serve here.
Thank you so much, William and Shane. And as you leave, do we know where you're going? Where is your next post and who will be your successors? And I know we already went over by 1 minute. We will go over by 3 more minutes. I promise we're not going to go longer than 105, but I do want to know who will be replacing you all and who will you be passing the baton to?
Well, what we in diplomatic world, we say, I have the capital punishment. So I go back to Brussels, back to the capital. And my successor will be an excellent diplomat. I don't know him personally, but he's serving now in the cabinet of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And he served also in China before. So he's quite a young guy, a little bit younger than I am, but you will be in good hands. And he will be in very good hands here.
And you, Shane?
I'll be replaced by someone much better than myself, Ciara O'Flynn. Ciara O'Flynn. She's much better, and she's a wonderful family, and she's a fantastic woman, and has worked like me for the European Union, as well as working for her own government. So you won't find her wanting on love for the European Union. And the other person, of course, I'll be handing over to is the wider Team Ireland here in the Southeast, including people like Siobhan Tinsley, the president of the Irish Chamber here in Atlanta. So if I have any other reference, it's to her, and if she would like to say a word, that'd be lovely.
Yes, Siobhan, if you can please, there you go.
Well, thank you so much. And Shane, we can't thank you enough from the Irish community for all your work here over the last 5 years and the passion and energy you brought. And I really appreciate the shout out from this group. And I appreciate I do plan to keep up the cooperative levels that you set during your tenure here. So thank you for everything.
Well, with that, I would like to thank everybody for joining us. And just how I started saying good afternoon in multiple languages, I'm going to try to take a stab at it in all the other languages. So we have merci, dankjewel, danke, grazie, tak. This one was very difficult. Ge, ref, ma, agot. And Evharisto. So
Machen Colleen.
Hmm?
Colleen, good woman, yeah.
So thank you, everyone. We're gonna very much miss our Consul Generals. Siobhan, we're very excited to work with you. I'd like to thank Anne-Marie, also R. van der Vos, Anne-Marie from the Netherlands Chamber of Commerce, R. van der Vos, the Consul General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, for putting all of this together and bringing us here today. So thank you, everyone. Again, thank you, Shane. Thank you, William. I'm sure it's not the last time we'll see you. And I wish everyone a wonderful day.